The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazines. We're trying in this period of time to help you learn and grow as an artist. Today we have a great landscape video with Kim Casebeer.
Hi, my name is Kim Casebeer and welcome to Light in the Landscape. I have been a painter for over 20 years, and during that time I have painted across the countryside, many different regions. However, I have lived in Kansas all my life. Because I've lived in Kansas all my life, Kansas is my backyard, and I have learned that painting Kansas is more about painting spatial relationships than painting things. And to do that, I've learned to create atmosphere and the effect of light in order to show drama in my paintings. That is what I'm going to demonstrate today. Some goals I have for this demonstration are to create a value study and a color study in order to be prepared for the composition, to pre-mix the paints so that we can be ready for the painting, and to build the painting slowly, starting with the block in. You can simply follow along, or you can paint along as I'm painting. So before we start painting, I will go over the materials that we will be using today. Okay, now we are going to talk about the materials that you're going to need for this painting. I use a variety of sizes of brushes, the flat brushes. I don't like different types of brushes. I focus on the flat brushes because they are longer and than the brights. And I have a variety of brushes from size 4 to 10. I also use different brushes, the synthetic brushes as well as the natural brushes. Next, I'm going to show you the palette knives that I use. I like to have a variety of palette knives, small ones for detail work right on the canvas, also larger, rounder palette knife, and then as a chiseled palette knife too. Okay, we have talked about the brushes and the different palette knives that you need. Now let's get to the important stuff. Let's get some paint out. First, I'm going to get out the titanium white, and I put this on the palette in the upper left. So after titanium white, I use cad yellow lemon, and I like to put out my paint in these worms. That way you can pull the paint out and not get the rest of the paint dirty. The next color that I have is cad yellow deep. Put out some of that. And the way I lay my paint out, I like to put all the warm colors on the top and the cool colors over on the lower left side. And I also lay them out typically from light to dark. So I have my lighter values first, and then the values get darker as I put them out. This color is yellow ochre, And then this color that I just put out is transparent orange. This next one is cad red light. And then alizarin crimson. Next is burnt sienna. And finally, asphaltum, which is a brown-black. And then over here on the left, I lay out my cool colors, ultramarine blue, and cobalt blue. Next, the greens. I have viridian green, and finally, permanent green light. So you can see generally they are light to dark, and then the cool colors on the left and the warmer colors up at the top. What I like to do is have a cool and a warm of each of the primaries. So I have cad lemon, and that's a cool yellow, and the lighter value of the yellow. And then I have cad yellow deep, and that is the warmer, darker yellow. And then I also have, in the reds, I have a cad red light, so it's a lighter value and the warmer red. And then I have alizarin, which is a darker red and the cooler red. And then over on the left side where the cool colors are, I have ultramarine blue, which is your warmer blue. It has red in it. And then cobalt blue, which is your cooler blue. And it's also lighter. So a nice variety of value and temperature changes within the paint. The next thing I'll get out is my medium. And I use a solvent-free gel as my medium. I really like this solvent-free medium because it doesn't run all over the place. You don't have to have a cup for it. It just squirts out onto the palette. And then also you'll need some odorless mineral spirits. And I like to use rags instead of paper towels. So the reason I like to use rags is because you don't have to use so many, and I can also wipe the canvas off directly with the rags if I need to. And finally, we have our canvas. And I mount my canvas to a gator board. This is Clausen's oil primed canvas. It's a single oil primed medium tooth canvas. So it's really good for landscape painting. It has a nice tooth to it, so it will pick up the paint really well. Okay, we have all of our materials out that we need. And so now it's time to work on a value sketch and work on our composition. All right, so we have looked at the materials that we need for this painting, and now I'm going to create a value study in order to get an interesting composition. I like to use markers for my value study. I don't like pencil because it's just a little bit sketchy. And so I have found that the markers give you a really true sense of the value in your value study. So I have design markers for a black one with a small tip and a wide tip, and a 70%, and a 50%, and a 30%. And they all have the small tip and the wide tip so that you can draw with them, but you can also create large blocks of color with them. So a little note about my process. This is an ideal process that I really like to use. I would go outside and create a plein air study, a color study outdoors, and that is what this color study is. And then I would also bring reference material inside, bring some photographs inside. So I have both of those here with me today. I have the photo references as well as a color study. And now I'm going to create a value study. And in this situation, my color study is very close to the way I want to create the painting. However, oftentimes the color study, if done outside, is not exactly the way I want the composition. So I would use the value study in order to change the composition. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you right now. Normally this thumbnail would be 2 by 3 inches, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to make it larger. Just find your horizon line in there. And I use the fine tip of the black marker to get started. Just finding my drawing points, finding the road in here and the foreground. So I'm really concerning myself with line right now, variety of line, getting diagonals in and horizontal lines in. And then I will work on bring this up a little bit, and then I will work on the block in of the values. Something like that. And let's start working on the sky. And I'm really focusing on trying to create a dynamic composition. So finding variety of line, what direction the lines are going, how is the viewer's eye going to move through the composition. Just sitting back a little bit and looking at the line work. So you really, to create a dynamic composition, you want to have a variety of line work. You want to have some nice diagonals, like these diagonals here that are moving the eye. You want to have verticals. These tree shapes can create some nice verticals. And then you need some horizontal as well. So that's essentially the line work that I need for my thumbnail. I'm going to call it a thumbnail, even though it's much larger than a thumbnail. And now I'll work on blocking that in. So I have my 70%, my 50%, and my 30% grayscale markers. And you want to use some neutral markers. You don't want the warm gray markers or the cool gray markers. You want the neutral gray markers. So I will start with 70%. The darkest darks in this composition are usually, and in this case, the trees. So I'll work on blocking those in first. And I'm taking some time to look at where I have placed the trees so that there's an uneven amount of space in between the trees, and also so that the trees overlap the different layers of the land. And I want to, in the value study, I want to connect the back part of this hill that's in shadow with the trees. So I will go ahead and block that in with the 70% as well. And if those connect, anytime you can connect the darks in your painting, that really helps a person's eye move through the painting. So we're going to connect probably bring this tree up a little bit so that those darks will connect. And that is, for right now, the only part of the value sketch that needs the 70%. So I'll move to the 50%. Now generally, the land is darker than the sky. So my darkest darks in my land and the darkest darks in the sky need to relate. So I'm going to have my darkest darks in the land, the 70%, is the darkest darks, and then the darkest darks in the sky are going to be 50% because the sky needs to be lighter than the land. And having this broad tip on the marker is really helpful to fill these areas in quickly. And I tell my students that it's really important to do these beginning stages of your composition to create the value sketches and the color sketches. And it seems like a lot of work up front. People just want to jump into the painting and have some fun painting. Everybody wants to do that. But this part of the creative process is very important because it lays the groundwork for being able to paint quickly later. So you will know exactly what your composition is, and you don't have to second guess yourself later on. I'm going to continue that 50 down here for the horizon line. And now I'll move to the 30% for the light part of the ground plane, the land in the front. And you can see how quickly that fills in your value sketch. So all of this sky is lighter, and the lightest part of the land. So there's a light part of the land back here, and there's a light part of the land in the front. And then in the middle, it's the middle part of this land where the road turns is actually in the shadow. So I probably will go back to my 50% marker and lay that in. Just light, maybe a little lighter than I laid in the other. And now stand back and look at it and determine if anything needs to be adjusted. And it's important to note that these thumbnails, you can do a whole bunch of these thumbnails. You could fill a whole page of thumbnails until you get the right composition that you need. Ideally, you'd want to make them 2 to 3 inches wide so that you can go through them really fast. They shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to go through several thumbnail sketches. I think the darks connect pretty well in this. Add a little more dark here. Repeat the road with use some lines to get that angle of the road in. So now that I have the value sketch that I like, and I have a color sketch that I can use for, to reference for color, and I have my photo references, I'm ready to start working on the studio painting. Okay everyone, we are going to get started on the underpainting next, but before I do that, I want to review the references just a little bit because they are very important. It's really important to have all of these references when you are painting in your studio. Just to review, I have the photo references, and those are really more for the detail work. And then I have the color sketch, which is for accurate color, because the photo references don't give us accurate color. The darks are too dark and the whites knock out. And then I have my value sketch, and that is to get the accurate underpainting. So I will refer to the value sketch a lot during this time when I'm doing the underpainting. So I'm going to put that off to the side here so that I can see it while I paint the underpainting. I'm also going to add 2 colors just temporarily to my palette. These don't stay on my palette, but they will be on my palette for the underpainting. And one is the transparent earth orange, and the other one is transparent earth red. And I use transparent colors for the underpainting because they are transparent and thin, and it's easy to see through them. So it gives a nice glow to your painting. The goal of the underpainting is to have something that complements the painting. So in most cases, I use a warm, an earthy warm underpainting, and that's what I'm going to do today. Have to get some mineral spirits here on the palette. And I use a large brush for the underpainting. This is a number 10. It's a natural bristle brush. And this is an older brush. A lot of times I use an older brush for scrubbing and for the underpainting. You can see that it is not straight across anymore. It's been used a lot. Okay, so we're just going to start moving some paint around on this canvas. First, I'm going to draw the composition using very thin paint. This is a little paint and a lot of mineral spirits. And I have to get my horizon line in there in the right place, first of all. Just getting some marks in the right places so that, and I'm going by my value sketch, and I'm also going by my color sketch. And this underpainting does run because it's very thin, but that's one reason why I have the rags here, because I just can wipe that up and keep going. All right, just going to get the right angle of the road in here. And this drawing doesn't have to be detailed, and it doesn't have to have everything showing in it. This is just to get the right composition and get the idea of the painting in. Being careful about where I place the trees, that I overlap that one tree over the road here, and leave an unequal amount of space. So there's a little space here, there's a lot of space between these trees. Have to make sure that you don't center those trees. That looks pretty good for the land. So now I'll start working on the sky. A lot like the value sketch, I am just concentrating on, to start with, I'm concentrating on line work, getting that movement in the composition. I need a lot of, I need like diagonals, I need some verticals, the trees are nice verticals, and I need some horizontal lines as well. So these horizontal lines, all of those together make up interesting line work in your painting. Okay, so getting that line work in. And one nice tip for if you're drawing your composition on the canvas, to find those lines. Look at your sketch and then find the edge of your canvas and mark where that shape comes in. And if you have a lot of those marks along the edge of your canvas, then it's easier for you to find your shapes and find them in the right places. Okay, so the line work is done, and now I'm going to start blocking in the underpainting. A note about this is not how I would create an underpainting for a plein air painting. I just tone the canvas for a plein air painting just completely the same value. But for underpainting in my studio, I will draw out the composition because I know what I'm painting ahead of time, and then I will create different values using my washes. So that's why the different colors of transparent paint, because I need the different values. So I will start out with the lighter value, the transparent earth orange. This is the one I've been drawing with, and get it nice and thin. And this is going to get drippy, and that's why I have a rag here so that I can wipe it off if I need to. This is a good time to just get loose with the paint. start to move that paint around on the canvas. I might get a little darker on the shadows of those clouds. So I'll pull some transparent earth red in. That's probably a little too much paint. If it's a little too much paint, again, I can thin that down with some mineral spirits and use a rag if I need to. Okay, gonna take a minute and wipe down some of the paint. Just keeping it nice and loose. And now I'll start working the land. So I will introduce some asphaltum, which is a brown-black. It's a nice dark value, but it's a transparent color, so works really well with the other earth colors for the underpainting. And this will serve as my darker value. When creating the underpainting, I like to get the darks in first, or toward the beginning of the underpainting. Connect those darks. And the back hill, this hill that's in shadow, it's not quite as dark as the trees in the front. Okay, back to some lighter values. And I want to make sure I keep that light for the ground plane here in front. We'll wipe some of that off to keep it light. The middle plane is in shadow, so this will be a little darker. Probably keep that as is. And oftentimes I have to redraw the line because it disappears in the painting process. So I will redraw these trees and redraw some of the line work. might need just a little more paint versus mineral spirits to get these just a little bit darker. And I'll put a really light wash in on the road. It doesn't need a lot because that's one of the lightest values in the painting. The lightest value in the painting is going to be the lights of the cloud, but in the land, the lightest value is this road. Take a step back and look at the value study, and then I'll decide what I need to add to it. All right, we'll get this light value for the road in, and then I'm going to redraw some of these lines. Get a little bit more of this dark brown. This is Phaltum to scrub in the dark values. And redraw some of the lines. And if it starts to run, just wipe it down. Again with the rag and paint back over it. I'm also going to rework that shadow area of the hill that's back here that needs to touch the trees in the front. And it looks like I need to bring the road down a little bit, so make sure that line for the road isn't going up too fast. Bring that down. Okay, I'm going to add just a really light tone for the clouds next. A lot of mineral spirits and a little bit of transparent orange, earth orange, the transparent earth orange. Just so that there's a nice warm tone under the clouds. And we'll wipe that. Don't want to lose the shape, so as you do this, if you lose a piece of the shape, then just redraw it. There's a nice angle to the cloud right here that I really want to emphasize. Get that shape right. And I want to make sure that I pretty much cover the canvas. I don't want to leave any white space. If you can't rub enough of the paint off, you can add some mineral spirits to your rag, and that'll pull the paint off. Can wipe out those light areas. It's like working in reverse, almost. You're wiping out. You're drawing by wiping out. I want to rework the shadow part of the clouds just a little bit more, so that those darks in the sky are a little more obvious. And all of this is really prep work for your painting. And it seems like a lot. It seems like if you are creating a color study and a value study, and then you're doing an entire underpainting, that's a lot of prep work. And it's easy to want to just get in there and paint. This is an 18 by 18 canvas, and this is small compared to what I usually work with in the studio. Usually I'm working with a 30 by 40 or a 30 by 30, something pretty big, and I do not want to mess that up. So all this prep work really helps for me to feel comfortable getting that big painting completed. Then you feel like you have done your homework and you're ready to just go to town on the big piece. I just want to keep this nice and loose. I need to know where the shapes are, but I also don't need any hard edges. I might darken the sky just a tiny bit too. There, that makes it more obvious where the cloud shape is going. So really close, just need to, some of the darks have run a bit Just need to repaint a few of the darks. It's really important to keep this thin. Lots of mineral spirits, because the mineral spirits will dry fast, and that will allow you to get back into your painting quickly. You don't have to wait a long time to let it dry. So still keep this, even though this is a darker value, keep this very thin. Little heavy-handed on the road back here. Going to thin that line out, and then then it disappeared toward the middle, so I need to redraw it. Just so I have some idea of where that's coming in at. Okay, and I think that the underpainting is complete. Just make sure to cover the entire canvas. I have a few little white spots to cover. Okay, I'm just going to wipe out a few more spots on the cloud to redraw the shape. Make sure it's a nice strong shape. Okay, I'm finished with the underpainting now. So ready to start getting some paint mixed. This is going to need a little drying time, so in between I'm going to clean up my palette and then prepare to start mixing paint, and then we'll just let this dry for a few minutes and then it'll be ready to paint on. Okay, now that I have finished the underpainting, I am ready to start pre-mixing the paint. And this is one more piece of building the painting before you actually start painting on the canvas. Again, all of this takes some time on the front end, but it really helps make the painting process go faster. So if I have all of my paint pre-mixed, then I can really just go to town on the painting and not have to stop. It doesn't stop my flow of painting if I have to remix colors all the time. The other really good reason to premix your paint is you can see the color and temperature changes and the value changes from one pool of paint to the other. So I will mix all of my sky colors together and all of my land colors together, and then that way I can see how those temperatures and values relate to each other right on my palette before I even touch the canvas. So that's what I'm going to start doing now. I'm going to start by mixing the sky colors. So grab some white. And when you're pre-mixing paint, make sure you use a lot of paint. A lot of times in classes I see students using just a little bit of paint, and then the problem is you have to remix your paint all the time. So I'm going to start by mixing the blue for the sky. With the exception of the sky, most of my paint colors are going to have a variety of the three primaries, so that you don't get real bright, garish colors, but natural colors. The only time I don't use that rule, most of the time when I don't use that rule, it's in the blue of the sky, because the blue of the sky is really best just nice and pure. So I'm using cobalt and white, and I'll put a little ultramarine in there. And then when you think you have the right value and the right color temperature, then hold it up to the color study, like so, and see if it matches. And that's my goal for this pre-mixing, is to make sure that these colors get close to the color study. Okay, now that I have the blue of the sky, going to start with mixing the gray, that warm gray for the cloud. And I want to mix it right next to the blue of the sky. If you look at the color study, it is a little lighter than the blue sky, but not by a lot. So again, a lot of white. But this time, because it's a gray, it's going to have some of each of the primaries in it. So I will start with some ultramarine blue and a little red. And then a yellow. We'll start with the lemon yellow. I'm going to start with a cooler yellow. That's why I made that choice. I want it to remain a bit cooler. And hold that up to the color study. That looks too cool. So I'm going to add some yellow ochre in there. It's a warm gray, but I still want to make sure that it looks gray, so that's why I was coming at the color slowly, trying not to get it too warm too fast. But I do need to warm it up. Okay, now with the yellow ochre in there, that looks really close. It looks like we need a little more red. And I'm going to put a little more white in there too, because I've gotten that value a little dark. Anytime you add titanium white to a color, it automatically cools it off, because titanium white is a cool white. So when I added that titanium white, I lightened the value, but I also cooled off the color. So I'm going to add a little more ochre. It's usually these neutral colors that take the longest to mix. That looks pretty close. Okay, the next color to mix would be the shadow for the clouds, that darker blue-violet. And I'm going to mix that next to these pools of color so I can see how they relate. I'm going to start with some ultramarine and some cad red light. I'm choosing the warmer red because that will already start helping that blue-violet to gray. If I use alizarin and ultramarine, I just have two cooler colors that will create a really bright violet. But if I use the cad red light, it will be a little grayer. Going to need a lot more red and blue in this. And a little lemon yellow too, to knock that color down, to gray it down a bit. Yeah, that helps gray it down. And that is getting really close. My only concern with this is that I don't think I have enough paint mixed. So I'm going to add a little more blue and a little more red. I try to be really precise with these when I'm mixing because it just makes the painting process go so much quicker when you feel confident about the color that you've mixed. This is getting really close. It might be a little dark. I'm going to hold it up to the canvas, hold it up to the color study. It looks a little dark, so going to add a little more white. And that looks really close. So there's the shadow color for the sky. And one more color that I'm going to mix for the sky is the red violet in the clouds, the lower part of the clouds. These clouds that are closer to the horizon line on the color study, those need to be a red violet. So pull a lot of, it's a light value, so pull a lot of titanium white out and start with cad red light and some cobalt. See where that takes us. It's probably a little bit lighter than it needs to be. What I need to do is compare the red violet with the warm gray, because these two values are very close in the color study. They are different in temperature, but they are the same in value. So I want to look at the warm gray and compare it to the red violet, and it looks to me like this is a little lighter than it needs to be. So a little more blue to darken it, and a little more red. And then I also need to tone that back just a bit, so I'm going to pull some yellow ochre into it. All three primaries. And let's see what that looks like next to the color study. It's really close. It looks like it could get just a little redder. And the cadmiums are really strong paints. They have a high tinting strength, so you want to be careful about how much you use. If you grab a large quantity of cad lemon or cad red, it will tint your paint really quickly. So that's why I always grab just a little bit at a time. I think we're about there. That looks good. There's one more color in the sky that I should mix, and that's this blue-green, this really light value right at the horizon line. I should mix that before moving forward. I don't mix every single color that I see on the color study. All these little temperature shifts will happen later. I try to mix the average color that I see within each shape. So that little piece of horizon line is an important part of the composition, so I need to mix it. Start with white and cobalt. And put a little viridian green in there. And that might need just a tiny bit of yellow. Don't want to get too much. Hold it up to the color study. That looks too cool still. I'm going to put some transparent orange in there. Transparent orange is one of those colors that will warm up a sky really quickly. I used to have cadmium orange on my palette, and it's a cold orange. The transparent orange is a really earthy, warm orange, and I like it so much better because it doesn't create cool mixes, it creates a warm mix. I think that's pretty close. So there are all my sky colors, and they're all mixed next to each other. The next step is to start mixing the land colors. So I'll wipe off my palette knife and get started with those. I'll mix those over here on the right side of the palette. And I'm going to start with the horizon, that back hill that's really blue. I'm going to start it by actually grabbing some of this shadow color of the sky, because that's what it's closest to. And I'll start that way. Add a little cobalt to brighten up this color a bit and lighten it up also. And I'm going to pull a little more of that gray back into it. Let's see, I don't need a lot of this color. Let's see how that looks next to the color study. And that is pretty close. From this point on, I need to mix the darker values in the land. I'm going to mix the shadow colors of the hill and then the darks of the trees, looking for that average value and that average color temperature within each of those shapes. So I know that this shadow is lighter than the middle ground plane shadow, and also lighter than the front shadow. So I need to progressively get these darker colors, darker values. Start with some ultramarine blue and a little red. I know I'm going to need more paint than this. Pull some more blue in there. And a little yellow ochre. And now I've got to get it the right value, so add some titanium white. And that is 2 blue. I'm going to add a little Cad Deep, which is a much warmer yellow. To help warm up this cool blue color. And I'm looking at this color and comparing it to the back hill color. And it looks like it's not quite dark enough, but I'm going to hold it up there to the color study to see if it does need to be darkened. Maybe a little bit. Time to pull some more ultramarine back out on the palette. This ultramarine blue has red in it, and that's one reason why I use it to mix these shadow colors for the land, because that's already adding some reds. So then we have our reds and yellows and blues. It's not as intense as cobalt. Cobalt blue is a very intense blue. And most of the time I use cobalt blue just for the sky. That is really close. So I'm going to stop with that color and move on to the darker value of I'm looking at the underside of the trees for this next value. Again, I will start with ultramarine blue. And I'm mixing this color next to that mid value that I just mixed. Now, it's important to note that this value on these trees is dark, but you still need to be able to see into it, and it's not going to be the darkest dark. The darkest dark is going to be right in the front for some dark accents right by the road. So once I mix these darks together, all these dark colors, this ultramarine and the cad red and the yellow, and I'm using yellow ochre again. Now I have a really dark color, so I need to add a little white so that I can see into that color. And once I add that white, do you see how that really cooled the color off? Because the white is a cold white. So that cooled that off. I need to add something warm back into it. Probably some transparent orange. That will help warm it, and that also helps gray that color back a little bit. And I'll pull that dark shadow color for the trees up here to the color study to test it. And it looks pretty close. so now I have the 3 darker values for the land, and it's time to mix the ground plane, the highlights in here and this shadow area in the middle, and then this front area that's really in light. I'm going to start with that shadow area in the middle because it is very similar in value to the hill that's behind it. So I'm going to mix it next to this middle value. Pull a little bit of that middle value over to get started. And there is a lot of blue in that shadow, so I'll use cobalt. And some ochre. And some red. Get all 3 primaries in. Now that red really warmed it up pretty quickly. I'm going to pull some cad lemon in that so it doesn't look too red. And that, if you compare this color, this this ground plane color to the hill color, this looks too dark. So grab a little white. And that really cooled that color off. So now I will need to pull some more blues and greens back into it and then warm it back up. I want these 2 values to be very close together, but still be able to see the difference. That might be close. Let me put that, test this color up here on the color study. That is pretty close. So I'll leave that mid-tone green as is, and now I'm going to use that as a reference and get that lighter green in the back mixed. Start with titanium white. And add some green and some viridian green and some cobalt. And then pull some yellow into it. And then we need more red to tone it back. So when you're mixing your color for greens in particular, the greens that are closer, that are in the foreground, have a lot of yellow in them. And then yellow knocks out first. So you'll have less yellow in the middle ground, and then you won't have very much yellow at all in the background. So if I want this color to appear like a distant green, first I have to get kind of a neutral green going, and then I can tone it back with red. And red is the modifier. Red will gray my green back. Create that gray-green that I need in the distance. This seems pretty light still. Let me test it. yes, it's too cool and it's too light. So we'll warm it up with some red and a little ochre. Get a little more viridian in there. And maybe even some permanent green. This permanent green is a very intense green. And I like to try to mix my greens first using other colors, and then I will, if I need to punch a color up, I will use the permanent green. And see, that warmed up that green really quickly. So this could be close. It's a lot warmer. It probably needs a little more green to it. Again, it's these grayer colors that usually take the longest to mix, but they are very important. You need to get them accurate. Okay, there. I think I've got a color that's close to what I need. So now I'm going to mix a couple of brighter greens for the foreground. And it's going to be helpful to see this yellow green next to that gray green. They're about the same value. The background and the foreground are about the same value, but the intensity of the color is quite a bit different. A lot more yellow in that foreground. So I'm going to start with the cad yellow deep and white and a little permanent green. We'll get bright right away. Need a little more. And a little ochre, so that way I have an earthy yellow in there. That green is definitely bright. It's probably a little bit too bright. I'm going to use transparent orange to tone that back a bit and to warm it up. And the transparent colors, it usually takes a little bit more of them to mix. So the cadmium colors, it doesn't take much to change a color with the cadmiums because they have a high tinting strength, but the transparent colors have a very low tinting strength. So this transparent orange doesn't tint quite as quickly. I'll put a little red in there too. Now, I don't think I have enough paint mixed. I think I'm going to need to add to this. That's a pretty bright green. It's maybe a little bit too light. Put a little cobalt in there. And then go back to the transparent orange to warm up that color. So the cobalt is in there to darken the value, and the transparent orange is in there to warm it up. That is pretty close. I will use that as the green in the foreground. Okay, so I have the bright green for the foreground, and now I'm going to mix that yellow green, that it's almost ochre for the foreground that's next to the bright green. And I need to pull some more cobalt out. It's always the blues and the whites that I use a lot of. We'll just go ahead and pull some ultramarine out also, and some white because I know I'll need it. Okay, mix this yellow up. So this color, these two colors in the ground plane in the foreground, this green and this yellow, they are pretty much the same value, but they are different color temperatures. So I need to look at the green that I've mixed and compare this to that green. Warm this color up quite a bit. And honestly, I think I need to cool the other green back just a little. So I'm going to put some cobalt in that. Go back to that green and add cobalt. There, now it is a little cooler. And now I'll get this green a little warmer. That way there's a noticeable difference in color temperature. It's getting close, it just is a little light. Need to pull more transparent orange in there. That nice warm orange. That's really close. This is probably too bright. I'm going to hold it up to the foreground to test it. Yeah, it looks like it needs to have a little more red in it to tone it back. So since it's green, again, that red will help modify the green. It'll tone that green back. A little bit more red and a little more green in there. Because I want this to be a warm green, but I don't want it to be really, really bright. Still needs to have a little earthiness to it. I'm going to pull some burnt sienna in there. That's getting closer. Still needs some more red. Okay, maybe a little white because it might be getting a little dark. I think I'm really close now. Yeah, that is good. So you can see that those two colors are similar in value, but they definitely have a temperature shift. They are different in temperature. So they'll play really nice together in the foreground. The one other color, maybe two other colors that I need to mix are for the road and then also at least one green for the trees. So I think I'll mix that green for the trees first because I can put it right next to the dark, the shadow color for the trees. Okay, so this green will be a slightly lighter value than the shadow color, than this cooler blue shadow color, but not a lot different. I want these two values should be really close to each other, just like in the color study. These two values, the greens and the blues, they're really close so that that shape still holds together. So within each shape, you want to adjust your temperature, your color temperature, more than your value. You can adjust value a little bit from shape to shape, within the shape, but you really want to adjust the temperatures more so. So this is a green that's just a little bit lighter than the blue, and it's a cool green. Needs to be warmed up just a little bit. Pull some transparent orange and some red in there. So I don't want it to be a garish green. It's going to have some red. That helps modify the green. That is pretty close. I'm going to hold it up to the color study and test it. See if it looks like that green that it might be a little dark. I think I'll lighten it just a tiny bit. Just a little bit of titanium white. A little is going to go a long ways in this case. So that lightened the color, and it also cooled it off. But in this case, I think that's what I want, so I'll probably leave it. It looks like it'll work. So the last color to mix is the road, which is, there's going to be a variety of color in the road also, but that main color, I want to look at the average of the mass. And I see a warm, almost a gold ochre in that road. So I'm going to start with titanium white and ochre, and then add some red. Now this is a really light color, and it needs to relate to the foreground, because that's where the road is next to these brighter greens that are in the foreground. So these three colors have to relate to each other. Hold this up. This color is probably close in value, but it's a little bright. It's going to need to be toned down just a little bit. All it has in it right now is yellow ochre, and red, the cad red light. So it has no blue in it. It needs a little blue. That will help knock the color down. So I'm going to put a little cobalt blue in there. And let's check this color against the color study. That looks good. So I now have quite a few colors mixed. I have my area for the sky colors, and I have this right side for the land colors. And if you notice, I mix them so that they can relate to each other. The shadow colors of the land need to relate, so I mix them next to each other, and then the green I mix next to the shadow, and then this middle ground colors I mix to each other, next to each other, and then I mix these lighter colors next to each other. That way I can see how the temperatures relate, and I can see how the values relate. So I think I'm done mixing the paint. And now the next step is we're going to create a block-in for the painting. Okay, I have pre-mixed most of the colors that I need. The colors that I have pre-mixed are the main colors for each shape. Within each shape, I have averaged the mass in temperature and in value. And then those are the colors that are on the palette right now. So the next step is to block the painting in. And to do this, it's pretty simple. You're just using a large brush. So I'll get my number 10 brushes out and fill the canvas with the paints that I have pre-mixed. Get started doing that. And I will also use a little solvent-free gel within the paint if it feels like the paint isn't moving quite like I want it to. So at least to get started, because I want this paint, I want to build this painting, build it slowly. So I want the paint to be thinner in the beginning and then progressively get thicker. So we'll keep this paint thin using some solvent-free gel. I'm going to start with the sky. In this particular case, this painting is more sky than land, so I'm going to start with the sky because the sky informs us what's happening with the land. Really just trying to fill the canvas, and I'm looking at my color study to go by what colors to put where and what shapes, and also the mark making. That's an important part of this. You'll notice I'm using a vertical stroke to fill it in, and that's because I want the back, the sky part of the blue sky part of the sky, not the cloud part, to be flat, to seem somewhat flat. So I'm using vertical marks to keep that flat. And then when I paint the clouds up to the sky, I'll use a different stroke for the clouds. And then that way there'll be some variation. And I don't get too particular right now about filling every little piece of the canvas. I like to see that underpainting poke through. If your paint gets a little too thick to work quickly, just add a little solvent-free gel in there. So I'm paying attention to where the shapes are going, but I'm not really paying too much attention to being precise about where I start and stop the paint. The paint can go over the line of the clouds, and that's okay, because I want to keep this loose. And I'll even put some of that sky color in here in the cloud just to redraw the shape. Okay, clean the brush. I tend to use the same brush for the entire sky and then the same brush for the entire land. It need to clean the brush in between, but doesn't need to be too clean in between that way. I'm going to work the shadow part of the sky now. These shadows should connect with each other, and they need to connect, really show us where the line of where the shape of the cloud is going. And right off the bat, it looks like that color is just a little too dark, but that's not a problem. I'm just going to add some sky color to that color, to the shadow color. Lighten it up just a little bit. Add a little cobalt to brighten it up a bit too. And these adjustments, just keeping your painting really organic. You know, being willing to make some changes where you need them to happen. If you pre-mix the colors though, that slight adjustment will go much quicker. There, that's lighter and just a little less ominous there, a little bit lighter. Get those shapes right. This part of the clouds are also painted with the mass. Painted, and what I mean by that is this shape is a longer rectangular shape. So if I was going to paint across that mass, I would paint horizontally. But since I want to paint with the mass to keep that flat, I'm going to paint at the diagonal that the shape, where the shape is. So painting down, painting in a vertical motion, is painting with the mass. Because keeping those dark colors flat will allow those lighter colors later that I build on top of the darker colors to pop, to help pop. And you'll have a variety of textures that way, a variety of brushwork. Trying to be careful about where I end the horizon line. Got to get this nice angular shape in here. That really helps move our eye. And this paint is getting a little thick again, so add some solvent-free gel. Okay, and there are some shadows in the clouds that are in the upper left and upper right, and I want to include those. I just don't want them to be quite as strong as these shadows. So we'll just put a suggestion of those shadows in. And you'll notice that most of the time I am looking at my color study, and then sometimes I'm also looking at my value study to make sure that the values haven't changed. But not very much am I looking at my photo reference. My photo reference is there if I decide later on that I need to add some detail to the painting, but I really want to focus on the big shapes right now. All right, clean that brush. And I'm going to start massing in the clouds next. Some more solvent-free gel to throw in there in the warm gray to keep this paint thin to thick. So we start out thin with the paint and then make it thicker as I layer. And for these clouds in the upper left and right, they are not as important as the clouds here in the middle of the painting. So I could throw a little blue into that warm gray just to darken that color, make it a little different from the rest of the clouds, and that'll help knock that color down a bit. Yeah. Because you don't want the viewer's eye to look at the corners of your painting. You want the viewer's eye to look at the focal point of your painting. Also, it's really important to hold the brush by the end of the brush. That way you stay loose. Okay, I'm going to clean this brush and get the warmer gray in. Thin that paint. Add just a little yellow to that warm gray. Warm up this part of the cloud just a little more. That looks nice. There, that's what I needed. Now I want to use a variety of brushwork. I'm painting, this is a longer shape, so if I was painting this shape with the mass, I would paint across it, kind of at a diagonal like this, but that flattens out the shape. So I want to make sure that I find a variety of mark making and paint across the mass. And this block-in, it's going to look very flat at first because it's all one color in one area. But later on, I'll break that up. This just really helps keep your shapes simple and strong. Okay, I'm gonna start adding the red-violet color of the clouds. Put a little gel in that paint to keep it thin. I'm just going to lightly touch this to kind of drag that paint across. The touch that you use with your brush is also really important. I can push this paint down and it will make a very strong shape, or I can barely touch the canvas with my brush and it will soften the shape.
Hey, would you like to win a beautiful painting worth almost $3,000? We've got a beautiful Joe McGurl plein air study that he's done of the sunset in Maine. It's gorgeous. If you want to have an opportunity to win it, go to paintinggiveaway.com. Just put in your email. That's all you've got to do, and you only need to enter once. We'll be giving away the prize at the end of May. Go to paintinggiveaway.com.
Painting is all about light and shadows, and getting this right will transform your paintings. Knowing how to build a painting from start to finish is the key to capturing stunning light on the clouds, on the water, and in the landscape.
I think the most exciting part about this video is that you learn how to slowly build up a painting, and then at the very end you can get those lights and darks that really push the painting and make it dramatic.
Now, for the first time on film, award-winning artist Kim Casebeer reveals her proven techniques, which she has mastered over decades of painting.
This video will enhance your skills by teaching you how to use color studies and value studies and work with underpainting in order to prepare to be successful for the finished painting.
She'll take you from the beginning stages of planning your landscape painting to the final stages, including all the pieces in between, with the goal of creating drama and the feel of light. See how Kim uses paint to create a light-filled atmosphere instead of merely painting what she sees. Knowing this can transform your paintings to breathtaking expressions of nature.
What's most unique about this video is I teach you how to pre-mix your paint so that when you're in the painting process, you can just really work through the painting without stopping a lot. And it's very important.
Kim will also show you how to gain the confidence and freedom to paint with flair and spontaneity, and how to use brushstrokes to create stunning effects. You'll love Kim's direct and humble style of teaching. With this video, Dramatic Light, you will enjoy a newfound freedom to let your paintings soar to new dimensions of color, light, and drama. Available on DVD or digital to view on your computer, tablet, or smartphone. Order Dramatic Light with Kim Casebeer today.
Well, that video is called Dramatic Light, and Dramatic Light it is with Kim Casebeer. You can learn more about that at lilyartvideo.com. I did a great interview with her. Let's get to it right now.
I started painting over 20 years ago. I painted in college and took college art classes. I graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and took a lot of painting and drawing classes, really enjoyed the painting process, and so I knew that it was something that I wanted to continue doing, so I've always enjoyed painting. I find my ideal subjects when I am usually out driving. It's usually something that just makes me want to stop the car and say, wow, I've got to stop and take pictures, or I've got to get my paints out of the car and start painting right away. It's just that aha moment that you see. It's usually in interesting light and shadow patterns on the land. I paint landscapes because I've been drawn to the landscape since I was a little girl. I grew up on a farm and we were outside all the time, playing outside. I've always been an outdoorsy type of person, so I just love to be outside and I love to paint outside. And then I like to bring those interesting ideas back into the studio and complete them in the studio. I would describe my style of painting as impressionistic. It's loose and painterly. And I also pull the dramatic light from the Hudson River School of Painting. I like to keep the brushwork loose and have a lot of variety of brushwork. I think good brushwork is really important to a painting. You have to have a variety of thin areas and then areas that you've built up with the brush so that you have this variation in texture. I really love painting light in the landscape. I find it fascinating how you can go outside and one composition, one subject looks completely different from one day to the next. One day it will have dramatic lighting on it, and other days it will have a soft, subtle light, and I find that very interesting. What really continues to motivate me and inspire me is just to go outside. I paint a lot in my studio, but to break that up, I like to go out and plein air paint and enjoy nature and see the different effects of light, and that is fascinating for me. What I love most about teaching people to paint is to be able to see them go from that beginning struggle phase to those moments that they have where they are starting to understand how to build a painting, how to build the lights and the darks, and how to put everything together. That's really exciting. A really simple bit of advice I have for students is to have a dedicated workspace. Just have a space where nothing else is going on and you can leave your work out and you don't have to put it away all the time, and then that way it's really easy for you to get back to your painting.
Well, I hope you enjoyed getting to know Kim Casebeer a little bit. The video is called Dramatic Light. You can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. I'm Eric Rhodes.
Painting is all about light and shadows, and getting this right will transform your paintings. Knowing how to build a painting from start to finish is the key to capturing stunning light on the clouds, on the water, and in the landscape.
I think the most exciting part about this video is that you learn how to slowly build up a painting, and then at the very end you can get those lights and darks that really push the painting and make it dramatic.
Now, for the first time on film, award-winning artist Kim Casebeer reveals her proven techniques, which she has mastered over decades of painting.
This video will enhance your skills by teaching you how to use color studies and value studies and work with underpainting in order to prepare to be successful for the finished painting.
She'll take you from the beginning stages of planning your landscape painting to the final stages, including all the pieces in between, with the goal of creating drama and the feel of light. See how Kim uses paint to create a light-filled atmosphere instead of merely painting what she sees. Knowing this can transform your paintings to breathtaking expressions of nature.
What's most unique about this video is I teach you how to pre-mix your paint so that when you're in the painting process, you can just really work through the painting without stopping a lot. And it's very important.
Kim will also show you how to gain the confidence and freedom to paint with flair and spontaneity, and how to use brushstrokes to create stunning effects. You'll love Kim's direct and humble style of teaching. With this video, Dramatic Light, you will enjoy a newfound freedom to let your paintings soar to new dimensions of color, light, and drama. Available on DVD or digital to view on your computer, tablet, or smartphone. Order Dramatic Light with Kim Casebeer today.